You may present the report now. I hope we are not going to read all this.
Before I will speak to this report because it's before every member here, and I will start on page 13. Page 13. The committee started its work on the 13th of May 2020 and adopted a three methods approach to the fact finding. One was that the committee requested for written memoranda from various stakeholders. We also relied on external sources of information as well as public hearing. The major sources of information available to the committee is the Central Bank of Nigeria that provided us with record of all financial transactions of NDDC between October 2015 and May 2020. We also got similar information from the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation that detailed out financial transactions of the NDDC. And finally, we got similar information from the Niger Delta Development Commission itself. Distinguished colleagues, on page 36 of this report shows us the amount of money that NDDC paid out as transactions between 2015 and 2019, which amounted to 1,034 billion naira over a period of 2015 October to 2019 31st of May. Mr. President, on page 37, we have concentrated on the time belt that constitutes the terms of reference of this committee, which is to look at the activities of the IMC. And the IMC started work October 29th, 2019 to May 31st. During this period, the NDDC received a total revenue inflow of 74,665,505,840 naira from three different sources: oil company contribution, statutory allocation from the Federation account, and internally generated revenue from tender and bidding fees for different assignments, totaling about 74.7 billion in income. As I said to you, the information were obtained from Central Bank, Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, and the Niger Delta Development Commission. Distinguished colleagues, for the period under review on page 40, the breakdown you have there is exactly what the NDC spent during this period. And it is spread over different categories of expenditure, which we have analyzed item by item in order to throw more light into the integrity of those transactions. You will also notice on page 40 that we have presented three columns of figures because those are the sources, three different sources of information on those transactions. And of course, we noticed discrepancies in the total amount from different sources of account records for the same transactions, which raises the issue of reconciliation of the accounts of the NDDC so that we can have a uniform figures, since they represent the same time and the same organization. Distinguished colleagues, from page 41 up to page 71. Page 41 to 71 captures the analysis of expenditure categories in the summary table that I referred to in page 40, namely projects, projects and activities that are listed in medical checkup, things like COVID expenditure, things like lesser fever expenditure, and different activities within the NDDC. The details are there for us to look at. And the analysis of this expenditure shows various kinds of process errors and infractions. The details you are able to look at. In chapter 4, on page 72, we also did a detailed analysis because we found out that substantial payments over this period in the NDDC was made to and through staff of the organization. Apart from their statutory salary payments, they featured very heavily in several program expenditure activities that ordinarily will raise questions about how that organization runs its affairs. In this place, we also noticed that the NDDC paid its staff several kinds of allowances that ordinarily one will be curious why staff of the organization is taking this organization. If you look at page 73, the summary of payments in NDDC that was made to staff and through staff is provided on page 73. And all these expenses were between October 2019 and May 2020. If you look at page 73, for example, medical checkup consumed a sum of 4.9 billion that was paid to staff of the organization. You see also at the bottom of that page, COVID-19, the amount of money that was paid through staff. Interest, tour duty allowances, stakeholders engagement, and so on and so forth. Overseas travel, public communications, and so on and so forth. Conferences, condolences, and overseas travel that was largely paid when the country was on lockdown and no international flight was coming in and out of Nigeria. We saw payments on scholarship that were paid to staff of the NDDC. Some of those scholarships were actually foreign scholarships that was paid to staff of NDDC. All of these payments happened between April and June of this year when the nation was on lockdown. This summary you see here, on subsequent pages of chapter 4, you will see the detailed breakdown of those kind of expenditure that we consider curious and needing further explanation. Of course, during our public hearing, distinguished colleagues, we put this question to the management of the NDDC. They had their explanations, but those explanations do not reflect the need for them. Distinguished colleagues, on the basis of our findings from the financial records of NDDC, which I have just narrated to you in chapters 3 and 4, we were able to identify in chapter 5 what we consider to be significant issues that arose from those findings, so that lessons can be learned and corrections can be made, so that in future such occurrences do not happen. Because a normal organization is supposed to function in the direction of its mission and vision, which we found very wanting. The first issue, which is the foundation, is the enabling law that established the NDDC. And we found here that there were non-compliance with the provisions of that act in several aspects. Number one is in the functions of NDDC. In the course of our review, we saw several payments in the life of IMC 1 and 2 to suggest that the core mandate of NDDC was not strictly being followed, because those payments do not speak to the purpose for which NDDC was established. We noticed that. Number two, on page 98, is that we saw unimplemented accountability mechanism that was provided in the law. The NDDC was supposed to have a monitoring committee to be set up by the president along with the board of directors of the agency. This monitoring committee is not operational. It was supposed to have an advisory council comprising the governors of the 9 Niger Delta states to provide some oversight into that agency. There is no record anywhere that these two bodies that the law statutorily provided for was happening. In 513, the agency by law was supposed to bring up its budget not later than 30th of September of every year. This is not happening. And the quarterly and annual reports that the parliament is supposed to receive from the NDDC is not happening. So these are areas of infractions of the law that set up the agency. These are accountability and transparency mechanisms provided by the Act to check the kind of excesses we saw in chapters 3 and 4. But because they are not in place, these excesses have become cultural to the institution. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, on page 99, we all know the story of the dissolution of the board of the NDDC. This inquiry by the National Assembly and the ongoing forensic audit provides an opportunity to return to compliance with the Act establishing the NDDC as far as constitution of the board is concerned. There is no point going back into what went wrong. But the exercise that we are talking about this day is an opportunity for us to go back to the law and operate the agency according to the law. We also note that the President has substantial powers in Section 23 to intervene in the areas of programmatic intervention of the NDDC. And on this note, and given the level of disenchantment against that commission by the people of the Niger Delta and Nigerians as a whole, we think this is also an opportunity for the President to enter into a covenant with the new board on what their task will be at least in the 3 years remaining of his tenure as President of the Federal Republic, so that NDDC can be seen to have performed under his presidency. Mr. President, on page 100, we saw the IMC performance as a major issue. And item 521, the top of that page, we found out that the fiduciary record of the tenure of the IMC since October 2019 has not shown any evidence of performance enhancement, efficiency, or prudence in the application of resources committed to the NDDC. The NDDC Interim Management Committee should therefore be dissolved to pave way for the constitution of the Board of Directors in accordance with the Act. The ministerial oversight has been consistently weak and inadequate, therefore making the Ministry of Niger Delta culpable of negligent supervision. Distinguished colleagues, on page 101, we saw that the independent forensic audit that was ordered by the President is a very, very positive action, but it will amaze us that the state of implementation of that forensic audit is at very, very rudimentary stages of recruitment of auditors in the 8 months of the existence of the IMC, the purpose of which was to look at the forensic assessment of the agency. We therefore believe that it may take a longer way if the forensic audit is left to the discretion of the management. Procurement issues were raised in the course of this work. The non-compliance with Bureau for Public Procurement for approvals or exemption from the procedure, a lot of that was noticed in the course of our investigation. And the quotes you have there are testimonies in the course of our public hearing, where the minister himself said a lot of these contracts were done in aberration of the Procurement Act. 103, page 103, 525. Budget discipline and culture. The NDDC does not operate on the basis of budgets. They operate on the basis of cash accounting. Once the cash is available, they spend according to the discretion of management, not according to the provisions of the budget. Because we have asked the management of our NDDC to provide for our committee a budget performance report. We asked for a budget performance report that details out how much was budgeted for and how much the agency has spent so far. As at the time of writing this report, that information was not provided because either it's not available or it is not readily given. But the details are also provided in the course of this report. We noticed in their procurement, Mr. President, colleagues, a lot of contract splitting. A huge project will be broken down into small bits and allocated to similar contractors in some cases, several contractors in several cases, and ostensibly, for anybody who has been in a huge organization, this is definitely in order to make sure that those expenditures fall within approval limits of management without necessary recourse to higher approval authorities. The tables following that section details out a sample of the evidence of such contract splitting. And all of these things happen in the IMC. I'll move to page 107, and I would like to highlight the situation of internal controls and audit system within the NDDC. Because you wonder, how could this type of financial operations be happening in an organization with internal controls and internal audit process? We found out that the audit system within the NDDC is very weak and complicit, and even the external audit report that we received contains virtually no information for such an organization. 1 trillion in 5 years, 1 trillion and 34 billion in 5 years, 2015 to 2020. Mr. President, the payment of staff for program activities is a major practice, and this does not lead to transparency and audit trail. That is contained in page 108. Mr. President, on the basis of the analysis of records and the assessment of the issues which represent the institutional challenges of NDDC, we came up with some recommendations. And it is good to underscore the fact that in view of the controversies around this NDDC investigation, we had to underscore in our public hearing that this exercise is a legitimate responsibility of the Parliament to make sure that agencies of government are prudently utilizing resources appropriated to them and also delivering on the dividends that they are supposed to provide. And we made it very clear that this exercise is not an exercise at witch hunting or to blame gaming, but to make sure that the NDDC money work for the people of the Niger Delta. On the basis of which, distinguished colleagues, I go to page 110, and as I go through these recommendations, the first recommendation is that the committee is of the opinion that a reconsideration of the executive oversight of the NDDC needs to be examined. And for purposes of consistency and equality of policy, there is need to review the inconsistencies and different in apex control of these development commissions. We believe that the NDDC should be reconsidered to report directly to the presidency, as it used to be, rather than allow it to be managed from other sources. We said that the absence of a board of directors at NDDC created a major lacuna of oversight, which the Ministry of Niger Delta could not fill, and provides a culpable neglect of supervision and could not function effectively as a board would have done, because ministries are known for policies while agencies are known for operations under a governance system that is established by law. Inauguration of other accountability mechanisms. This is the need, not just to stop at the institution of the board, but the monitoring committee and the advisory committee should also be concurrently implemented, so that there are multiple layers of oversight in order to ensure that the money of this agency work for the people of the region. Mr. President, improvement of governance process is there. These are recommendations basically for institution, upgrading of the institution. On the financial accountability and framework review, we found out that restoration of a budget-led system will help the Niger Delta Commission to do a better job of service delivery. The practice of spending without a framework of a budget and a plan against which expenditure is being made is not helpful to the NDDC, and no wonder we are not surprised that the 81 billion or so that was spent between October and now is not really development oriented. And that is why we think that the performance of budget procedure reform is a necessity. Mr. President, the initiation and supervision of the forensic audit. We believe, as a committee, that in order to ensure that the forensic audit achieves the purpose for which it is set up and inspire confidence in the operational and financial processes of the NDDC, oversight of the audit should be transferred to the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation. This will guarantee independence, it will guarantee credibility, transparency, and professionalism in the output of the exercise. Furthermore, the committee recommends that Mr. President, with advice from the Auditor General of the Federation, should appoint a renowned, internationally recognized forensic auditor to carry out this exercise so that the outcome will be unanimous and it will not be subject to controversy or compromise. Mr. President, we believe that the strengthening of the procurement process is very, very crucial, because you can have a lot of money coming into an organization if the exit gate in terms of projects and procurement is not well managed by procedures and processes and oversight to ensure effectiveness. We are going to likely suffer the kind of hemorrhage that is taking place in the NDDC. We found out that in a lot of cases where unjustifiable payments were made to staff of the NDDC, they should be made to refund these monies, because what is good for the goose is good for the gander. In the case, for example, COVID relief-19, the agency spent 1.49 billion in payments, various payments to members of staff in various categories, ranging from 10 million to 600,000 naira by individual staff. And this is on record. It's there. 10 million to 600,000 per staff. And the total amount for 1,400 and so staff boils down to 1.4 billion. These kind of payments, we believe, should be refunded by the management of the IMC, and such refund should go into the NDDC account, not the Federation account. That was an error on the part of the committee. The money should go back into the account of the NDDC and not into the Federation account. Please correct that on your paper. Mr. President, there are serious process challenges in the NDDC, institutional challenges in the NDDC, and Chapter 6.4 of this recommendation has recommended a review of operation processes, a review of financial and accounting processes, review of human policy, instituting a performance-based organization, and the enhancement of internal and external audit capacities. But all these internal review processes is best done under a formally constituted board and management, with the operationalization of the accountability mechanisms in terms of the monitoring committee and the advisory council. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, last but not the least is the need to review the corporate social responsibility policy of the NDDC. A lot of money has been spent on condolences, stakeholders engagement, community interventions. A good example is 2 or 3 staff take some huge sum of money and they call it to give petrol to community. And it's all there. It is good for an organization to do corporate social responsibility, to want to make his impact felt within his operational communities. But there is need for a policy framework that does not leave this in the realm of discretionary abuse of those that are operating the system. Mr. President, in conclusion, the committee noted that it is difficult to find a correlation between Niger Delta community development and the cash invested in the zone. There's a far gap of value for money. And therefore, the question was raised at the public hearing by a number of activists, NGOs, civil society people, and other members of the public present. Indeed, with the recurring theme, it could be taken as a common source of agitation among the people at present. Continued cash injection into the Niger Delta challenge issue has not worked under various IMCs, 2 of them so far. It may be useful at this juncture for government to intervene by stepping down the IMC arrangement, thereby helping them to leave the stage for a properly constituted board and with specific mandate to address the pains of the people of the Niger Delta. The time has come when the money of the Niger Delta must work for the people of the Niger Delta. Distinguished colleagues, I so submit.
Well done, well done.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman.